This week on The Communicators, two legislators discuss Congress's role when it comes to cybersecurity issues. Representative Mac Thornberry is the chair of the House Republican Cybersecurity Task Force, and Democratic Representative Jim Langevin is co-founder of the House Cybersecurity Caucus.
And this is C-SPAN's Communicators program. We're continuing our series on cybersecurity and cyber threats to the United States. This week, the congressional response to cybersecurity. Joining us is Representative Mac Thornberry, who serves as chair of the House Republican Task Force on Cybersecurity. Congressman Thornberry, thank you for being here. Jennifer Martinez of Politico is our guest reporter. Congressman, what, in your view, are the cybersecurity needs of the U.S. to defend against? And do you think that the White House plan introduced in May addresses those needs?
Well, the country faces a wide spectrum of threats in cyberspace, all the way from vandalism and petty crime to more serious crime, theft of intellectual property, to things that people are calling cyber warfare. And so it's a wide spectrum of threats. I think the fundamental issue is that our laws and policies have not kept up with the changes in technology. And so, to a large extent, the government is playing catch-up. And that's what I think the White House proposal is trying to address. That's what we're trying to address in Congress, is to try to help update, basicthere our laws and policies. I think the White House proposal has some very helpful elements in it. I think it's a good building block for steps that Congress can and should take. It doesn't address all the issues, but we're not going to fix all the issues in a single bill. It's going to take a conversation with the American people. It's going to take I think, an incremental sort of approach. But there are a number of issues that it does not address that I think we need to at least be talking about.
Do you think that cybersecurity legislation can ever keep up with cybersecurity threats, given the fast-moving?
No, and it shouldn't try to. I mean, we cannot have the federal government pass a law that says what the defense needs to do. But we can improve our organization. We can update laws, criminal, our military doctrine, to reflect this new reality that we have national security challenges as well as criminal challenges and other things, economic challenges in cyberspace. So there is no definitive point we'll reach and say, okay, now we're done. That's why this has to be a continual sort of process.
Jennifer Martinez.
So the House is going to tackle cybersecurity legislation in a piecemeal fashion, whereas up in the Senate, they're scrambling to hammer out a single, larger, comprehensive cybersecurity bill by the fall. So since the House is taking this piecemeal approach, are there any bill or bills in particular that you think the House should act on first and you think are particularly important? And then also, do you think it's possible to pass a cybersecurity bill through this Congress?
I do think it is possible to pass legislation in this Congress that will make significant progress in cybersecurity, and that's what the Speaker wants to do. Mm-hmm. Because it is so complex and it touches on at least 9 different committees, he wanted to form a Republican task force to at least begin to lay the groundwork for what the committees would do. And so the work will go through the regular committee process, and as you know, the Speaker feels strongly about that. Mm-hmm. But our hope is this task force can kind of set up the framework from which the committees can operate. And you're right, I think when you have the committees do their job, that means that will be more of a piecemeal because different committees have different pieces of jurisdiction on the cyber issue. And I can't tell you what the final legislative vehicle will be. As you say, the Senate's working towards this big bill. But I hope we don't take an all or nothing approach, big bill or nothing. I don't think that would be helpful, because there are some parts of cyber that nearly everybody agrees we need to act on. Improving the government's own procurement and cyber practices. There's a legislation called FISMA that for the government's own. And so there are other examples like that. But I think the key is, and what the Speaker wants to do, is do something that helps make the country safer in cyberspace.
And so for the task force, Speaker Boehner, Majority Leader Cantor announced the creation of that last month, and they tapped you to lead it, so congratulations.
Or condolences.
And Congressman Langevin, though, has been pretty vocal about how this task force is not bipartisan. It's only comprised of Republican members. Do you think that because it's comprised of members from only one party, do you see any obstacles you're going to face because of that, or potential challenges? And then also, can you address that charge from Congressman Langevin about how this is potentially turning cybersecurity into a partisan issue?
Yeah. I don't think it's turning into a partisan issue at all, and Jim certainly is one of the most knowledgeable people in Congress, House or Senate, on these issues, and he and I happen to be chair and ranking member of a subcommittee on armed services that has cybersecurity jurisdiction for the Pentagon. We work very well together. And there is no reason for cybersecurity to be a partisan issue. It has not been in the past, and I don't think it will in the future. The Speaker felt, though, that before we moved legislation, that he needed an advisory group, basically, to step back and look at the broader picture of cybersecurity and establish, or at least lay out, some sort of framework from which the committees can do their work. We're not writing legislation in the task force. We're just trying to step back and look at the bigger picture, lay out kind of an approach that seems to make sense from a House Republican standpoint, but then it's going to be up to the individual committees, and there's every expectation and hope that as the committees actually write the bills, it will be completely bipartisan. And of course, in the Armed Services Committee, I guarantee it will, and Jim and I will be working together on cyber legislation there. And the other key thing, the task force has members on it from each of the 9 committees that have significant jurisdiction. And so you get a variety of inputs as you're looking at that bigger picture. And he felt that we needed to do that first.
Congressman Thornberry, as you know, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has expressed some concerns about hampering business with regard to this cyber plan. There's also been concerns expressed about privacy issues. Where do you stand on both those fronts?
Well, I think both are very legitimate concerns. If we take action through the government that makes our business less competitive, we will not have been doing the economy or the country in any favors. And at the same time, if the government takes action that significantly affects our individual privacy rights in the name of cybersecurity, then we also will have changed the essential fabric of our freedoms. And so it's a little bit like some of the screening mechanisms that we've gone through in the last decade. We're going to have to work our way as a country through it, understanding we'll accept some risk in cybersecurity, but at the same time, we can't leave ourselves just open and vulnerable and exposed to malicious actors in cyberspace. So we need to work with privacy folks, we need to work with business, we need to work with the high-tech community to take these steps I'm talking about, understanding it's not a final answer, but to try to increase our general level of cybersecurity around the country.
Is this only a defense threat, or do you see it as an economic threat as well?
Oh, it's clearly an economic threat. And I can't tell you the numbers. Various people use these gigantic numbers about how much stuff has been stolen from industry. It's intellectual property that is being stolen, and that's American jobs that are being stolen. So there's no doubt that there is an enormous economic element to this, as well as criminals making money, as well as a national security element to it. And of course, that is the primary function, I think, of the federal government.
Jennifer Martinez.
So industry has discouraged Congress from instituting a set of regulations or security standards that they must follow, and instead have advocated for bills to have incentives that reward the private sector for taking steps to better secure their computer systems and networks. So I wanted to see, do you prefer incentives over regulation? And if so, what would possible incentives be? Are we talking tax breaks? Are we talking grants for research and development for businesses?
Well, to me, it's always preferable to encourage somebody to do the right thing rather than to tell them, go do the right thing. If you get their interests aligned with what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to be more successful. And just as we were talking earlier, this is a very difficult area for the federal government to regulate in because it changes so much. But on the other hand, if you can encourage business to make the changes on their own to keep up with the changing threat, then I think you will have accomplished more. Now, there may be some more regulation that's needed. And people most often talk about the nuclear power industry, but maybe the electricity grid as areas that are already fairly regulated, and perhaps additional regulation is needed. So I think we need to look at that. But to me, it makes more sense if you can encourage people to think the same way. And a variety of incentives have been talked about, from tax incentives to liability protection. And others, if you can streamline some of the audits that are already in law, you can offer an enticement for businesses to improve their cybersecurity and thus remove some of the burden that they face under Sarbanes-Oxley and some of the other current regulations and laws.
Mm-hmm. And also, as part of the task force, basically you're reporting back to GOP leadership in October. Have they asked you to look into any particular areas of cybersecurity? And when you report back to them this fall, what are they going to be doing with the feedback that you'll be giving them?
They did give us 4 specific areas that they wanted us to consider. One is critical infrastructure. One is information sharing. Another is laws that need to be updated. And the fourth one is authorities issues, and there we're talking about a fair number of national security related type authorities. So those are 4 areas that they've laid out. There may be others. There wasn't exclusive. And really it's going to be up to them on what they do with the recommendations. But the hope is that we take this kind of cross-committee framework without writing the details of the legislation, but we set that up, but that enables the individual committees to move out in their piece of jurisdiction under that framework and consistent with that framework. Meanwhile, as they write the legislation, you're going to have this bipartisan approach, talks with the White House, and considering what the Senate approach is. That all has to come together through the process.
Some of the committees that will be active on cybersecurity in the House include the Armed Services. Mac Thornberry serves on that committee. In fact, he's chair of the subcommittee on emerging threats and capabilities. Homeland Security, Energy and Commerce, Intelligence, Oversight and Government Reform, and Judiciary. Now, Congressman, just to follow up on Jennifer's question, if you're reporting back in October, what do you think could possibly be passed with regard to cybersecurity legislation in this Congress?
Well, there are 2 or 3 pieces of legislation already moving in the House that touch on cybersecurity. I think a subcommittee of Energy and Commerce has already reported out a data breach bill. We have a couple provisions in Armed Services. The Science Committee just approved last week a bill related to cybersecurity. So things are moving. Again, I think the hope is that with this framework, over the next year and a half, we can make substantial progress in a variety of areas, but not put all. My preference personally would be not to put all our eggs into a single 2,000-page bill that you have to ram through and nobody knows what's in it. I don't think there's a very good history of that sort of approach.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Martinez.
And then the budget crisis has consumed Washington for months, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that's going to impact the types of bills coming through the House And also, the House GOP freshmen have made it very clear that they're against anything that's going to increase spending. Do you see that as a possible issue going forward as these various committees are looking at cyber legislation?
No, I think you're exactly right. It will be an issue going forward. So a lot of people perhaps would like to have more federal research in cybersecurity. If so, the question is, how do you pay for that? The incentives that we were talking about, some of them may be tax incentives, may have a cost to the federal treasury, or at least CBO would score them that way. That may make them more difficult to accomplish. So cybersecurity, like every other issue in Washington right now, is going to be constrained by the tight budgets that we all face. No, I think that's absolutely true.
And in fact, the National Journal reports that the Pentagon's budget for 2012 includes $2.3 billion for protecting against cyber attacks. And OMB estimates that total government spending on information security this year will be about $12 billion. Jennifer Martinez, we have time for one more question.
Okay. Well, since you're the vice chairman of the Armed Services Committee, I wanted to ask you about the Pentagon's recent release of its first formal cyber strategy. And in that, they did not give a very clear-cut definition for what an act of war is in the digital age and what type of a cyber attack would warrant a physical or kinetic response. Were you disappointed that they left that question unanswered, and how important do you think it is for the Pentagon to be spelling out what an act of war is in the digital age?
I was somewhat disappointed at the vagueness of the strategy. I don't know that any of us should expect the Pentagon or anybody else to come up with definitive answers to some of these very hard questions because they are difficult. In our first hearing in our Armed Services Subcommittee this year, I tried to pose the question this way. We know what we expect Department of Defense to do if a bunch of planes come to bomb a refinery in the Houston Ship Channel. What do we expect the federal government to do if it's a bunch of packets coming to bomb that same refinery in the Houston Ship Channel? What is the government and particularly the military's responsibility to defend private business and facilities in cyberspace? We don't know. So I didn't really expect the Pentagon to come up with definitive answers, but I think it's very important that we grapple seriously with these issues, and that particular strategy was more vague and didn't advance the ball as much as I would like. At the same time, Secretary Lynn has been very helpful in putting forward ideas and strategies to help defend the country, and so some of his speeches maybe have advanced things a little further than this strategy did.
Congressman Mac Thornberry is a Republican from Texas, chairman of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, and chair of the House Republican Task Force on Cybersecurity. Thank you for being on The Communicators. Up next, Congressman Jim Langevin, Democrat of Rhode Island. We'll be talking with him as well. And now we are continuing our conversation on the congressional response to cybersecurity threats, now joined by Representative Jim Langevin, a member of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, where he serves as ranking member, and he's also co-founder of the House Cybersecurity Caucus. Mr. Langevin, with the President's cybersecurity proposal introduced in May, how do you think the Congress can implement that, and how would you like to see it improved?
Well, it's certainly the White House proposal has been a long time in coming, but I'm finally glad it's here, and I think it moves us in the right direction. I'm hopeful now that the Congress will take up certain most of the elements of that cybersecurity proposal, and hopefully we can implement it. The challenge would be, of course, reaching across jurisdictional lines and multiple committees that have responsibility for cyber and trying to move a bill forward. But I'm hopeful that certainly on the Senate side there may be a comprehensive bill that they've been pushing, that at least that they're talking about moving through the Senate. Senator Harry Reid has said that he wants to make that a priority. And again, I want to continue to push the House to also take up comprehensive cybersecurity legislation.
Now, Mac Thornberry said when he was here that he would not prefer a 2,000-page bill. He would prefer it almost in piecemeal.
Yeah. Well, I would say let's get something done. Whether it's a comprehensive bill or the piecemeal, we at least have to address the what I think are glaring threats out there. Right now, we have serious threats facing the country in both vulnerabilities in cybercrime and cyber espionage. Those are the and also threats we see in the areas of critical infrastructure. Those are the things that concern me the most. Where the most damage can be done, of course, is in critical infrastructure. And at the very least, I'd like to see that threat addressed. And if we can close that vulnerability, then we'll go a long way toward protecting the country.
Jennifer Martinez with the Politico.
And also when Congressman Thornberry was here, he was talking about the creation of the cybersecurity task force in the House.
Right.
And we've talked earlier about how you've been disappointed that it's Republican members only, and you had hoped it had been bipartisan. And he was saying the reason behind the creation for the task force was to help reduce the procedural challenges in the House when dealing with different types of legislation, and also make sure that the bills are shepherded to the right committees. Do you think that's going to help with some of those challenges?
Well, as we've spoken about, I would have preferred to have seen this a bipartisan effort. I've been at this for several years now, dealing with the issue of cybersecurity, and I've always went to great lengths to try to make this a bipartisan issue, and hence creation of the bipartisan cybersecurity caucus. That being said, I've also raised concerns I have with the speaker, and both directly and through correspondence, that it should be a bipartisan effort. I'd like to see that continue. But that being said, I do want to see the issue move forward. However, we get this done, and I'm not looking to make it a partisan issue. Let's see what is going to come out of this task force, and then we're going to try to work together to try to get something through the Congress.
Mm-hmm. And then you were talking about protecting critical infrastructure. So in the White House plan that came out this spring, the Obama administration basically gave the Department of Homeland Security a stepped-up role in managing the federal government's cyber defenses. That also included having DHS work with industry to come up with a framework that would boost their own defenses against cyber attacks. But there's been some concern raised by those in the security community about DHS's ability to perform in this new elevated role. Do you think DHS is up for the mission?
Well, as you know, I would prefer to see a strong director in the cybersecurity office in the White House that is a Senate-confirmed position that can reach across government and better coordinate our cyber defenses, but also working more closely with the private sector. So that being said, there are strong elements in the President's plan that I like. I think it's very important that they emphasize information sharing between the government and the private sector. The government has broad visibility into the threats, but we don't have broad visibility into what's happening in the private sector, and like the ISPs do. So if we can, bring them those barriers that prevent information sharing going both ways, I think that the private sector will be much better protected. The other thing is, I do like the fact that they're encouraging more closer collaboration with trying to protect critical infrastructure in the private sector, most of which is again owned and operated by the private sector. The electric grid in particular is a real cause of concern, because that's where I think most of the damage could be done, both in terms of potential loss of life, but also damage to our economy. So we've identified vulnerabilities in our electric grid, and certainly could be exploited by an adversary or an enemy or a terrorist, if you would, that could cause that kind of damage. So closing that vulnerability is just so important, and it's been a high priority of mine for a very long time.
Right, and you actually testified on protecting the electric grid not that long ago.
That's right.
Do you think it's possible to get a bill passed this Congress on protecting the electric grid?
Yeah, and so this is where the right authorities are in place are going to be important. That's why, and I'm hopeful that we can get a bill through. The GRID Act passed in the last Congress, and unfortunately didn't get to where we needed to become law. But that would have given more directive authority, for example, to FERC and that would have given, which they don't have the authority right now to direct that vulnerabilities be closed when they identify problems in the electric grid. NERC is the self-regulating body of the electric grid, and they propose rule changes to FERC. FERC can either approve or reject those changes, but can't direct changes be made. We need to improve that authority, and that's what my legislation would have done, and it would have done that also in the Grid Act. My legislation that I've introduced would give broader authority to the Department of Homeland Security to regulate in the area of critical infrastructure. Right now, they don't have the authority, and even in the President's proposal, it's not strong enough. It encourages through incentives for the electric grid to close vulnerabilities, but we need to. I think they have to have stronger authorities to regulate.
Congressman Langevin, do you see a need for one director of cybersecurity in some capacity? So if there is an attack on a U.S. government site or a private site, there's one resource to go to, also has budgetary authority?
Yeah, I do believe that, and that's the legislation that I have that I've introduced. And the Executive Cyber Security Authorities Act would basically create a cybersecurity office within the White House that has both policy and budgetary authority. Would be a Senate confirmed director, and again would be able to reach across government to really compel compliance with the things that need to be done to protect the .gov network. We're not doing a very good job right now in protecting the .gov network. That person needs to work more closely and collaboratively with the private sector. General Alexander is head of Cyber Command and NSA, and they do a very good job, as good as can be done, at the protecting the .mil network, on military networks. But we don't have that same robust authority and coordination in protecting the .gov network, and there's a lot of work to be done there.
Where are most of these attacks coming from?
Well, from a variety of sources, and I don't want to. It's not only about attacks. I look at it in terms of looking at cyber intrusions, disruptions, or attacks. Attacks being the worst that could happen. Most of us are familiar with cyber intrusions, and people think of things like going in and hacking into our email or spamming the email list. But intrusions can also be much more serious. Espionage, criminal activity, certainly in the banking system, where there are millions, if not billions, of dollars that are siphoned off and stolen every year. It's a real problem in protecting our banking system. In espionage, defense contractors being hacked and critical information being stolen, some of which might even be at the classified level, or if it's not classified now, will eventually become classified. Those are real problems. The area of attack, of course, that's what that term is used, in my opinion, sometimes too loosely, but the potential exists that a nation state or a terrorist could, for example, hack into the electric grid through what's called a SCADA attack, which governs safety systems on pumps and valves, and could actually cause a generator to blow itself up. That's been proven through Idaho National Labs when they discovered this vulnerability. And those are the things that, again, that worry me. What we're seeing mostly right now is cyber crime or espionage, and those things really need to be addressed because it's doing great damage to our economy.
What do you think about kill switch legislation, or the concept of a kill switch?
Yeah, there's no such thing, and I don't believe that. I don't ever want to see the government have that kind of power to have a kill switch. What I do want to see, again, is closer cooperation between government and the private sector. The President's proposal would help to achieve that by allowing for great information sharing, so that what the government is seeing in terms of viruses and attacks that are out there, that we could share that with the private sector so they know what signatures to look for. But then private sector can share with the government of what they're seeing and how we can work more collaboratively to better protect our citizens.
Do you think that businesses need incentives to do so, because they're afraid of sharing information with the government because they're not sure how the government's going to use that information, if it could possibly hurt their business later on down the line? And when we talked with Congressman Thornberry, he was saying that he preferred incentives over top-down regulation. Do you agree?
I think it has to be a combination of the two. Certainly we have to have better and stronger regulation where just incentives alone won't accomplish what we need to accomplish. but where we can collaborate and encourage through incentives, we should certainly do that.
And then another problem that you've identified is a shortage of trained professionals who can deal with this ever-evolving and growing threat of cyber attacks. How big of a problem is this going to be for us later on down the line?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you raised that point, because that's another area that has to be addressed. We don't have enough people with the right skills and talents to go into the cybersecurity field right now. The director of the Clandestine Information Technology Office at the CIA had said, going back a couple of years ago, that we only have about 1,000 people in the country that can compete at a world-class level in the area of cybersecurity. And what we really need is somewhere between 20 and 30,000. So there's clearly a need. I'm trying to address that in a number of ways. In particular, we just had a study done at the Pentagon to identify the skills that we need and the career path for those people that would go into that field. But also we created the Cybersecurity Challenge at the high school level, and we're collaborating with the SANS Institute in creating that program. It's run in several different states now. But it encourages young people to think about a field in this in cybersecurity. We put them through the paces and different challenges in a program that lasted about a couple of months. But it's not only about taking something that is just a hobby and using it for fun or for just schoolwork, but that harnesses this talent, these skills that may eventually lead to a successful career for our students.
Now, Congressman Langevin, Jennifer raised with Congressman Thornberry the issue of the budget issue. With everything going on in Washington right now, with cuts being made in the budget, OMB estimates that about $12 billion is spent government-wide on cybersecurity prevention efforts. Do you see this as a problem in the future, getting enough money to protect from cybersecurity intrusions, attacks, et cetera?
Well, obviously, as we know, in tight budget times, we have to get smarter about how and where we spend our dollars. And that's why that strong collaboration coordination is just so important. I believe that if we have a director in the White House Cybersecurity Office that is Senate confirmed, that has both policy and budgetary authority, we can compel compliance across the range of departments and agencies in government to make sure that they're doing what they need to do in cybersecurity, and we're not duplicating efforts or having things, putting in place either software or hardware that is duplicative or isn't the best that we could get in terms of the best bang for our buck. So right now we don't have that strong coordinator. We do have a very good coordinator in Howard Schmidt at the White House, and I give him high marks for the things that he's accomplished with the limited authority that he has. Most of it's been, kind of encouraging, and he's encouraging collaboration across departments and agencies. But he doesn't really have the authority to, the stick of going to OMB and saying, this agency isn't doing what it needs to do in cyber, and we need to take some measures to make sure that they are held accountable.
Jennifer Martinez.
And also, I'd asked Congressman Thornberry about the House GOP freshmen who've been very outspoken about how they're against anything that's going to increase spending. And you were saying the budget is going to impact the type of legislation that's moving through the House. Do you see this as a possible issue that Democrats are going to have to tackle later on down the line?
Well, clearly, if we don't address the threats to our own cyber networks on the .gov or .mil, or even encouraging collaboration in the private sector, that we're being penny wise and pound foolish, because the damage that can be done, and that already is being done in terms of the amount of data theft that we're seeing, it's costing us dearly right now, and it's much more effective to do those upfront things that we need to do right now to make sure we have a robust cyber defense on our networks, on our cyber networks, and then obviously we could prevent a lot of the things that we're seeing happening right now that are costing us at a very dear level.
And what did you think of the Pentagon's recently released cyber strategy?
Yeah, so I was at the Pentagon for the rollout of the Pentagon cybersecurity strategy, and I want to thank Secretary Lynn for his work and leadership on this, and a variety of other key players at the Pentagon who all had a hand in putting forward that strategy. It was definitely a good move in the right direction. What I was concerned about is that it didn't go far enough in identifying the red lines of what we consider to be an attack and what our response would be. Now, the Pentagon responds that they want some of ambiguity right now, and keeps the bad guys guessing, if you would. But because the threat is so serious and the damage could be so catastrophic, I think it's clear that we need to do more in identifying, again, what we see as a cyber attack, and so that the enemies, our adversaries, know what our response really would be.
And finally, Congressman Langevin, how do you thread the needle legislatively when it comes to keeping up with technology, protecting privacy, and addressing some of the concerns that groups such as the U.S. Chamber have expressed about this heavy-handedness of a proposal which may hinder business?
Well, again, that's where collaboration comes into play. This really has to be a public-private partnership, and privacy and civil liberties concerns have to be at the forefront of our thinking and our conversations about all of this, and not an afterthought. And I think the more we engage the privacy and civil liberties community and have them as a part of developing the strategy, is a way of avoiding any criticism or any problems that could result. But again, this is an ongoing effort. The cybersecurity issue is certainly a moving target. It's always difficult to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. But we do this best by information sharing and collaboration.
Congressman Jim Langevin, Ranking Member on the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, and also co-founder of the House Cybersecurity Caucus, and Jennifer Martinez of Politico. Thank you both for participating in our series on the Communicators on Cybersecurity.
Thank you.